Okay, cool. So I guess we'll start with me. So people are like, who the heck is this lady? My name is Emily. I am a readers and information services librarian here at Vernon Area Public Library. So I am the coordinator for our For Movies Fans page, which is a website, a page on our website for movie recommendations and new releases and all sorts of different things like that. And I host one of our movie discussions, Real Talk, each month. And so that's what kind of bore out this cool new opportunity that we had to talk about our time machine. So I am joined with Leo, who is the co-director, producer, and writer, I do believe as well, for our time machine. He is a filmmaker based in both San Francisco and Taipei, where he is currently joining us from Taipei. So welcome from yonder. He is a documentarian who has worked on various different films in various different capacities, from directing, writing, cinematography, ranging from all sorts of different topics in politics and communities and families. Recently did 2 episodes of the PBS series Asian Americans that aired in, it was 2020 or 2021. It was, yeah, cool. And then our time machine premiered at Tribeca Film Festival in 2019, where it won the Best Cinematography for a Documentary Award. And it's been at several different film festivals internationally, and nominated for a bunch of different awards, including the Gotham Awards and the News and Documentary Emmy Awards, which was relatively recently that had kind of gone through. So phenomenal film, phenomenal reception to it. And in terms of connections, the most important one, which is Leo is part of my family, which is great. Thanks for joining us.
I am late. No, I told Dan about this, and he was saying that this was the best news he's gotten all month or since the new year that we're doing this together. So
oh, nice. Yeah, so if people are like, this movie is like, it's so acclaimed, how did this tiny library in Illinois manage to rope? Family connections and nepotism is all you need. So we can jump in with some questions. I figured there was a lot of different places that I wanted to start from a pre-production standpoint, but also even just the very first opening of the film I thought was pretty interesting. But if you could, I had read that it had kind of started and came to your attention after the project had already kind of begun, and it was your co-director, Yang Sun, who had really started working with Maoyan first. But if you wanted to talk a little bit about how the project came to be and how you got involved and how you knew that this was a story that you wanted to be involved with telling.
yeah, so I was born and raised in Taiwan, but I spent most of my adult life in the US. But I still go back and forth, and I've been working with a documentary organization here in Taipei for the last 8 years or so. Every year they would have a fairly large-scale international pitching forum where a lot of the documentary directors from the Greater China, as they call it, which is China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, and they would come and pitch their projects to international funders or broadcasters and the folks from the streaming platforms. And back in 2015, wow, that's a while back. Young, my directing partner, actually had came to Taipei to pitch that project. And when I saw just like a couple of minutes of the very raw footage that he had, I was basically sort of immediately in love with the story and not even totally understanding why I was having such a strong reaction to it. I think he had a little bit of the puppet material. He had some backstory about the family. And it just became really clear that I wanted to help him. I wanted to be a part of it. So I went up to talk to him, and I kind of already knew this, but I'm getting my story ordered all wrong. A couple of years ago, I had taught in China, actually, at the Communications University in Beijing, and Yang was one of my students. So he actually came with a project, and we say hello. I didn't think much of it, and then when he presented the project, I was just really smitten by it, and I told him that I wanted to help. And so at first, I offered to produce it for him. I mean, for first-time filmmaker, which he was at the time. He had just graduated from graduate school. The help that they need is really to connect their projects to the people that can support it financially, or getting it out to the world as a distributor. So I thought I was able to do that, but as I dug into the project, it became pretty quickly that this was a project that needed someone who is looking at it, or who is telling it from the perspective of 40-year-olds, instead of somebody who's just in his 20s, because I said the storyteller needed to understand what our main character Ma Liang was going through. So we talked about it, and we decided that we should just collaborate fully as director producer, and that's how I came on. Wow, that's a really long story. And that was 2015. We shot for about 3 years, with the very last year really just waiting for the baby to be born. So, and then we were able to finish and premiere at Tribeca. And then, it's been really amazing to see the film travel around the world and connecting with audiences of various, cultural background, and who speak totally different languages, because I just feel like, I think that's the reason why it resonated with me so much, because I just knew that it was a universal story, that the family relationship, the generational connection, the idea of aging and memory, and sort of the messy beautifulness of life is just anybody can relate to it.
And I feel like that has come across in a lot of the different screenings that I noticed when I was seeing like all of these different events too, where it's like, obviously like Tribeca Film Festival is huge, and it's been at all sorts of different things. But then I know that you did an event at the Music Box in Chicago too. And so it's kind of run the gamut of all of these different things. And I feel like that speaks to a lot of the universal appeal of the story. So do you know, did you know that you were waiting for the last year filming because you wanted to film with the baby? Was that like the main goal? Like you knew that that's what you wanted the end of the film to kind of touch on, or did it just kind of once you got?
Yeah. So I saw that John had asked the question about the foresight of to film the events. The thing is, for the kind of documentary that I tend to make, that I'm drawn to anyway, it's usually about real life unfolding, and I mean 99% of the time we have no idea what's exactly going to happen. It's a bit of a gamble. We kind of look at the scenario, we look at the people who are involved. We like in this instance, we knew that Ma Liang was a really interesting character, that his father was a really interesting character, that their relationship was super dynamic and fascinating, and that they were embarking on this project to make something, right, that will get done in a certain amount of time, and it will go out to the world, and it will either succeed or fail. And we were just going to gamble and see if we can find a story out of this trajectory, right? I mean, I guess the other piece that we had going for it was that we knew we wanted it to be both about the producing, the creation of this piece of artwork, but also following the evolution and the changes in the family as the family deals with the aging issues of of its patriarch. So those were all the elements that we knew, and the rest of it we just kind of like, okay, we're just gonna show up, you know. And Manang was super game, and Manang's parents love having us around, you know, kind of to chat and to ask them about their work and their history. And you know, and we just showed up when they let us. You know, Young was, I think Young was like a grandchild to Manang's parents, so they love having him around. They were like, let him sleep on the couch. And you know, so he really, I mean, I guess to use a news term, like he kind of embedded into their lives for a small period of time because he was living in Shanghai. I was in the US most of the time, so I wasn't able to come for most of the shoots, but I did come when the bigger shoots were happening. So, you know, I mean, by the time, the funny thing is we had started to edit in maybe 2017, 2018, and we all kind of looked at each other and tried to figure out like, well, how should the story end, right? Because it's about life and life keeps going, right? And one of us, you know, me, Young, and our editor, Bob, had joked that like, oh, all we need right now is for Mariang and Tianyi to get married and have a child. And then the next thing you know, I mean, this is, it never happens like this in documentaries, actually. You know, oftentimes some, you know, things happen not the way you expect it. But in this case, it was almost like exactly how we wished it, was that we wanted them to kind of give birth to the next generation, and for now to understand what it's like to be a father, right? You know, and because in so many ways he's fathered the work that he's produced all these years. He's really, you know, the little puppet Makuchi's father, right, if you will. And now to have an actual child of his own, I mean, you know, we just really thought that would be a really beautiful ending, that he would have new revelations and new ideas and new approaches and new attitude towards his life. And that was, you know, in many ways, exactly what happened. So we were really working on putting the film together in post-production and waiting for the baby to be born. And we missed the day that the baby was born because the baby came early, of course, right? Because his life. And we were really bummed out because we had thought that, well, maybe the day that baby was born was going to be the final scene, but it ends up to be this little celebration of the baby's 100th day birthday, you know, whatever that term would be. Turned out really well because the parents were able to be there, and you know, we were able to capture this connection, and you know, so yeah, the joy of making observational documentary.
Was it hard to kind of switch gears, because early on in the film and early on in Malyang's own kind of imagining of Papa's time machine, it was largely, he wanted it to be collaborative, and then as it becomes more obvious that his father is unable to collaborate with him, kind of have to switch gears a little bit in terms of both on him with Papa's time machine and kind of the way that the play itself was going, but then also the focus of the, I mean, I'm sure it comes up a lot when making documentaries, because like, yeah, life is unexpected, but was it hard to switch gears in terms of like what you assumed you were going to be making a movie about?
Yeah, actually, it was really tricky because we really thought that father and son were going to be equal characters, you know. I mean, you can see in the film that we spend a lot of time with Mariang, you know, talk about his creative process and exploring his struggles of somebody coming into middle age and you know, kind of thinking about his legacy and looking at his work and figuring out what's next. We thought that we would have the same for Dad, right? Like, you know, somebody who came out of the Cultural Revolution, who was you know, persecuted during the Cultural Revolution, and ironically, and I don't think this was clear in the film, but he still really very much believed in the Communist Party, and he believed in the policies, you know, and so he was such an interesting contradiction that we wanted to mine that a bit more. But it became pretty quickly obvious to us that he just wasn't there anymore, that he wasn't able to carry on that type of conversation. You know, he was at the point of dementia and Alzheimer's where he's just starting to repeat the small handful of stories that he's, you know, sort of fixated on, right? The one that we use in the film being that he's directed, you know, this many operas at the Shanghai Opera Theater, that he was, somebody who was respected during his time, but he wasn't really able to recall other details. So it was kind of a pretty big gear shift, and for a little bit, we weren't sure necessarily that we had enough material to put together a feature length film that we thought, oh, if we don't get all the twists and turns and the plot points that are interesting enough to say what we want to say, then we might make it into a short film. But as the production of play continues, and then Ma Liang and his crew and his team started to confront also challenges in the production, and then that he's really started to question his own ability to make work, and also his own standing as a good son. We felt like, okay, I think we have enough, and we just need to figure out a way to line all these elements up that it makes sense. I don't know. I know people sort of get confused when they're writing credits for a film like this, right? Like, there's not really any narration. There's not, obvious things that feels like is fictionalized, right? But for me, people think that documentary is a documentation of a certain set of events, but the truth is, what a documentary is, especially for a film like this that follows a group of people's lives intimately over a period of time, it's about constructing memory, right? Sort of connecting to the theme of our film, that all of us, when we recall an event in our life, we don't list out step by step, moment by moment of everything that's happened. We curate and edit and construct, right? Like, what happened, what did you do over the holidays? Well, you had 15 days of holidays, but you can explain it in 3 minutes, right? So you've made choices to include certain things, to highlight certain things, maybe to exaggerate certain things, and to construct it so it's an interesting story for the audience to hear. That's exactly what we do with this type of documentary, right? So that's what the writing is about, is we observe these people's lives. We feel like we really understand what they've gone through. We also understand in some ways the essence of what they've gone through, and we make certain choices to present the story so that the audience can understand the essence of the story and the core and the theme of the story. So how do we end up there? You're rambling. I'm the one who's rambling.
Well, believe me, we'll get. No, I'm just kidding. Well, that kind of raised another question that I had too, which was kind of like, how do you, when you film for so long, how do you decide what goes in? But that kind of touched on that, especially when trying to hit those beats. It's interesting to think of like filming from 2015 to 2018, even though I know you 2017 with like the last year of waiting and stuff. You think like, oh my God, that's so much time, so there must be so much there. But it does make sense where it's like, yeah, but you don't want to show the entirety of like the pre-production of the play, because like I'm sure there was a lot of trial and error and stuff going on. And
so for instance, right, like one of the things that we really struggle with is how to present the footage of the puppets. We knew that the puppets were our biggest visual asset, right? It's gonna wow people. But if you have puppets for 90 minutes, people are gonna be bored. Actually, if you have puppets for 30 minutes, people are gonna be bored, right? So I think that's the challenge, is that we really have to be really carefully map out, what to show at what time, when to reveal what, when to make the puppets do certain things, right? And so that's why we started, with sort of like almost like a conceptualization, and then we choose to focus on the hands as a representation of the larger challenge, what they have to go through to get to the point where the puppets are fully built and are human-like. And then when that happens, then we have to go into like, okay, when do we reveal the rehearsal? When do we bring them onto the stage? So even though we film all this stuff, even though we have amazing puppet stuff, like hours and hours, we just knew that we couldn't do that. right? So yeah, I mean, so much of it has to do with like the variety of the material and also how the materials connect together.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love in an alternate timeline, I would be a puppeteer based. I was a musical theater
It's
kid.
not too late. It's not too late.
If I was a children's librarian, maybe. I did musical theater when I was in high school, and I was the puppeteer for Audrey too, for our production of Little Shop of Horrors. And it was my magnum opus. It was amazing. So the puppets were really cool to me. And it was so cool because like when they finally get the hands to work the way they want it to work, you feel that triumph. It's like they're so excited to just have the fingers move, and it was really cool. I thought it was really cool just the way that the puppets were constructed too, with the
Wait,
the body mounting.
I totally forgot about this.
Oh.
So this is Manal made this for me as a souvenir. It doesn't work so well anymore. It's sort of a miniature prototype of the Makuji. Oop, this blur background is not working very well. Let me see if I can get rid of it. There you go. So it's actually really simple. I mean, I think that the model that they use were just your standard puppet you can, or the figure they can buy in an art store, and they just added, I mean, you could do individual fingers. Okay, I'm not doing a good job. So anyway.
Yeah, and then I don't know, I get, again, love puppets, so I'm like, and then the strings are like the tendons, and I was like, it's so cool. But I was raving for the puppets, but I also understand where I might be a minority because I have a weird interest in puppets. So that was like my own personal thing. But yeah, I get there's like this level, especially because the film is kind of a dual film in the way, like you were talking about the two strands of the making of and also the family. From like a standpoint of being a documentarian working on documentaries, like what is it like to kind of like, how do you decide what level? I know you said you were only there for like bigger shoots and stuff, but like how do you decide what level you play in the film itself? Because like I've seen documentaries where like it's like they have a good relationship with the subjects and they're kind of in the film themselves too. Like how do you kind of go about figuring out that balance of filmmaker, because like the filmmaker touch is always kind of on a story anyways, just from the nature of crafting the narrative and putting it together, but how do you decide that kind of level to which it comes up?
I feel like it's a couple things. I feel like there are different types of documentary filmmakers. Some people are just much more integral to their subjects' lives. Like for me, I have a hard time making work about people who I don't like because I spend so much time with them, and I just would rather hang out with people who I admire, who I find interesting. I mean, there are plenty of people who make more sort of adversarial documentaries, in terms of like they go and do an expose and they try to show their, whoever they choose to film, show their flaws and show what they did wrong. I'm not able to do that. And like you also have folks who are super invested, like they, there's the filmmaker James Longley, who's a Seattle-based documentary filmmaker. He would just go to Iraq and spend just basically living there to make the films that he did, and I think that depending on the filmmakers and depending on what their lives are like, they can make different kinds of commitment, or depends on their interests. Like some people just maybe have no interest in doing that kind of work. So Yeah, I mean, I just feel like it's a difficult question because every filmmaker will give you a different answer. Like you look at Michael Moore, like most of us can't be Michael Moore because Michael Moore is Michael Moore. This year, in the last couple of years, there's a Chinese filmmaker, well, Chinese American. She lives in the U.S. now. Nanfu Wang. She's made a lot of film about China where she's herself in it. And it's you could argue that there's sort of Michael Moore-ish elements to that of her, going and basically confronting certain situations. Like she can do that and I can't do that. There's no way for me to do that. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that doesn't, I'm not sure that answers the question. But at the same time, like I feel like I'm more involved in my subjects' lives than some other filmmakers with who, sort of do more interview-based work. That they really just line up a bunch of interviews, they show up, and then they don't, they have more sort of smaller or shorter connection with their subjects, and their work maybe is mostly historical. There's more archival material, so that's a whole other way of making it work.
Yeah, I think one thing that struck me a lot, just in particular in terms of our time machine too, with kind of being in the story where there obviously was a connection because the movie was so intimate, and there was a lot of trust that was very evident from the subjects to the filmmakers, because we got insight into these very, very like intimate scenes that I feel like is a clear indication of kind of that involvement with like the book lamp scene, and also then the scene where after there's the premiere and the father doesn't remember that he had seen the play and stuff. So even in that time of like a degradation of health too, like he felt comfortable enough talking to the cast members that were there and who were filming and stuff. So I was just like very intrigued by like documentary filmmaking, and that has that level of intimacy and emotions. Is it difficult to do stuff like that, like from like an outsider but not outsider perspective? Like
yeah. No, I know what you're saying, and sometimes it's hard to look at these moments and comprehend what goes on to behind it to get there, right? Like I actually sometimes I feel the same in watching some of my colleagues work. Like, how did you even do that? How did they even get there? How do they even get access to this? I mean, I think the answer is that behind each of those moments, there are years and years of relationship building, oftentimes, right? In order for us to have captured that moment with Dad, which is a moment that we kind of really struggle with. To put in the film. Young especially had to just have been hanging out with the parents for 2 years, basically, right? Not necessarily thinking that, oh, I'm in 2 years' time, I'm gonna get the super intimate moment, but just the very fact that we've committed to being there and being that long, and eventually, right, as the statistics will have it, like your chances are you will capture something that's intimate, that's private, and for a lot of us who do this kind of work, that's kind of what we're looking for. We're looking for moments that doesn't get shared publicly at a like a local news interview, or even like your standard like press discussions or whatever, right? We want to capture the behind the scenes stuff, and those are the moments that really could be really profound. So yeah, I mean, I think that's what it is, that the access and the trust is utmost important in this type of work, and the relationship is really complicated, right? Because we're not just there to be their friend, we're showing up with the camera, right? And we have the power to portray them in many ways that maybe they could be a little concerned about, but at the same time, they have the power to terminate this, project that maybe we already invested several years of our time in. So it's a really strange relationship between the documentary filmmakers and our subjects.
Is it different working with people who are like artists themselves
Yes,
too?
yes. I mean, I really feel like we got lucky with this specific story because we were with people who understood and who appreciate and maybe in some ways admire the work that we're trying to do, and that they trusted us. That you know, as people that create work, that tell stories, that we have certain type of process that we need to go through, and that if we ask them something that seemed absurd from their perspective, maybe they just trust that we have our reasons for asking them to do so, right? In the film, that we break up the film with these letters that Ma Liang writes to his child, and a lot of that text actually came from Ma Liang's own book of essay, but we would take excerpts of it and condense it, and then we would just send it to Mana and say, hey, can you just read this and record it? And she never asked us like, well, what are you doing it for? You know, how are you gonna use it? I mean, we wouldn't really know because that was the process. We wanted to try something out. We didn't know what it would look like yet, but he was, you know, he was just super collaborative and very game in helping us in doing that. And yeah, you know, and also it was really helpful to be filming a family of performers. They're used to be looked at. They used to be, you know, in front of camera. They like it. They like sharing their stories. They like talking about their work. So, you know, in many ways, those tend to be the easiest or the best subject to follow around.
Yeah, a little bit maybe less hesitation and kind of kickstarts some of that that opening up process when they're already kind of like ready to, or not unused to the attention and stuff. I mean, even like because his mom was like a performer too, so
Mom is actually the most famous of the three of
really,
them. Mom is an actress. Mom was an actress in a very famous Chinese TV series.
oh cool.
Like I think she still gets recognized more than any of them. That you know, like she's somebody who is established, very established. So
She was so her tidbits of information were always so interesting too. So it was like she was like
you know,
a side character. It was fun, like, but
we really wish, like I wanted more Mom. I'm the good and bad thing about Mom is that Mom is so even, and Mom knows what she wants, and Mom is, you know, like the what you want in a story, right? In a long form story is a character that struggles, right? A character that is uncertain. That character is at a transition of their lives. So we could follow the struggle. We can see a transformation. Mom did not have that. Mom knew exactly who she was. Mom knew exactly what she wanted. So we couldn't necessarily follow her the way that we follow Ma Liang and Dad. So that was in some ways one of our regrets. That Mom wasn't in more of a crisis like the other two. So
yeah, less of an arc.
yeah, exactly.
But one thing that I was thinking of when I was watching it too was the kind of thinking about so mostly when we just went for real talk, when we discuss movies, by and large, we usually do feature films. And we talk a lot about characters and things like that, and kind of the setup of characters being not necessarily likable, but engaging enough that you want to follow their story. Because I don't think a character needs to be likable for you to want to follow what's going on. But I was really struck by the idea of how I had not really thought about it a lot before, not thought about it as much, that like documentaries also, like, even though it's very different, it's also, you have to start with that base of creating a foundation of your characters too. Like, they are also characters. And you have to set up the thing so that your audience then does care about what's going on. And with this being more long form and not meandering, but a little bit, because it's kind of slice of life in a lot of ways, even though it's still with a lot of heavy stuff. How do you go about like setting up this foundation of creating a character out of a real person? if that's not too difficult of a or involved.
No, you know what? I'm actually really glad that you're saying that this is your revelation, because that's exactly what we do. I mean, I'm you know, that this is really great for you to share with the folks that you know, that as documentary filmmakers, we work on that. We talk about characters. We actually always refer to, you know, we actually refer, I mean, I refer to folks in my film more as characters than as subjects, you know, because in some ways it is constructed a little bit, right? That we're choosing to reveal a certain side of them and withhold certain side of them in order for them to come, you know, to appear as a set of logical traits, you know, collected onto one person. So, and we talk very much about character arc. We work on it all the time. Like, that's what the editing process is. You know, people get very curious, like, well, why do you have to edit for like 8 months, 10 months? I mean, we're writing a novel, basically. We're writing, you know, what I tend to tell folks that we're writing like a, I mean, not a true crime fiction, but like a sort of what's the right term? What am I blanking out?
Like a narrative nonfiction kind of.
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. It's like a creative nonfiction. That's what we're doing, right? Like we're taking nonfiction, we're taking real life elements and weaving it into a narrative that clearly has character development, has plot points, has payoffs, you know, and if you could probably do an exercise, if you're that geeky, you can probably do an exercise and just take our film and plot it onto like a 3-act structure, and it's probably going to fit pretty well. Mm-hmm. So, and when we're editing, we do talk about that, right? And in this particular case, we struggle a lot with Ma Liang's character, right? Because we we wanted it to land somewhere. Like we wanted his character to evolve. And in this particular case, it means that we wanted his character to see his struggle and see his life and see his relationship with his father and see his own you know, worth and see his own work in a different way at the end of the film versus the beginning of the film, right? So at the beginning, we basically, I think for us, it's this piece I can probably talk about. So it's simply, I can talk about his arc in 3 chunks, right? The first part, the first third of the film, you could summarize that Ma Liang is trying to, he's being naive. He thinks that he can make this work and collaborate with his father or offer it to his father, and everything will be better. Like, everything will be okay. He could stop time. You know, he could you know, fulfill this wish that he's been wanting to for a long time. So there's a naivete at the beginning that gets bursted, right? In the middle, where he realizes, oh, that's actually not going to happen. So there's now like a level of desperation, you know, that he's trying everything he can to, you know, like the play's not going so well, dad is not doing so well. He's having doubts about his creative process, right? So the middle part is all about him struggling with that, you know, and you know, with some happy elements like meeting the future wife and you know, like having that. And the last third is about him coming to peace with the fact that he can't stop time, that he can't change the outcome, but what he can do is to find a way to celebrate it, right? So that's, you know, that was the arc that we came up with for Ma Liang. And, you know, it might sound simple, actually it took a long time for us to figure out how to line up all the minute elements so all of that pays off, right? The scenes in that you see in the film didn't necessarily unfold exactly in that order, right? We took some liberty in terms of moving some scenes around out of the chronological timeline because it just simply works better. But the really interesting thing with this type of observational film that we make is that when we show it back to the character, no one ever says to us, oh, wait, that's out of order. Like, people say, yes, that's exactly how I experienced it, you know? And I think that that's our job as documentary filmmaker to make this type of work, to create, you know, Werner Herzog, the German documentary and fiction filmmaker, talks about this idea of aesthetic truth, right? There's no absolute truth. There's aesthetic truth, which is that you experience or you see something, you're like, well, that's truthful to me, And I think for us, that's one of our biggest goal is to be able to tell a story, then show it back to our characters, to our subjects, and have them say, yes, that's exactly what happened to me, even though us as filmmakers knew that we had moved some things around and it didn't happen exactly that way, but that's how they experienced it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I guess I never even thought about the chronological order of things too. I was having all sorts of revelations too about documentaries where one of my favorite things in any kind of story, but particularly in film because you get to see it visually and stuff, is the idea of food. Food is love. Food is a love language, and food is family in a lot of ways. And so to see so many scenes of the characters sitting around like a table eating together, sitting around a table together, I was like, food is a love language, food is family. I was like, I'm seeing it here too.
You're talking about Chinese family on top of it. I mean, like Chinese people is known to be eating a meal and talking about what they're gonna eat the next meal. I mean, I don't know if you know enough Chinese folks to experience that, but that is a very common occurrence.
Yeah, so I just feel like it just made it that much more for me as someone who loves to see that in films too, made it that much more intimate and more connected and to the characters and stuff. It was cool. I did enjoy seeing that a lot. Okay, I have more things, but it is like 7:45, so I'm going to pop on over into the audience questions that I had gotten before. If you guys want to take some time, if you have anything that has come up since we've been talking or you remembered and you want to pop that into the Q&A, that is great. But I'm going to I have to pop this tab over. So of course now I can't read it. Technical difficulties. The cells in my spreadsheet are not in wrapped form. So the first question we got was, what happened with Papa's Time Machine after the documentary was filmed? Was it a success? Is it still performed? What kind of was the trajectory of the show after its birth into the world?
I would say that it was not a great success. It was a small success, that it did have a few runs in both Shanghai and Beijing, but it was not the big blockbuster that maybe the producers who wanted it to be. That said, they're still trying to get it out. They're still trying to figure out what else to do with it. They're talking about like an animation project. I mean, Ma Liang's made other puppets since Papa's Time Machine. So I would say that like any kind of independent work is still a work in progress. That they're working very hard to continue to find audience with the piece.
And then so this one was the film was like written and compiled for many reasons, as they know, as was surmisable in the film. But what was the most important reason from your perspective?
The why the film is made, or what the film is about?
Why it was made?
Why it was made? Well, that's a very interesting question. I can tell you that why I wanted to make it. I think that as somebody who is now I'm in my early 50s, but as I was starting the film, I was in my late 40s, and seeing it was a weird experience of watching Ma Liang or learning about Ma Liang's story and feeling weirdly autobiographical. That not that my parents are actually in really excellent health, but it just feels like aging is inevitable, and in my stage in my life, I'm seeing that coming my way, and I'm also wondering about my own worth as an artist, as a filmmaker. It spoke to me in so many really fundamental ways, and I just felt really, really strongly that I wanted to tell the story, and I knew also that a lot of people was going to be able to relate to this because, you know, I feel like I'm surrounded with friends who are coping with that, and you know, the interesting thing, right? Like especially for the generation, my generation, and the generation like your generation, Emily, folks are getting married later, they're having kids later, you know, which people don't think about. That also means oftentimes people are taking care of their parents and their kids at the same time. And that's actually what I've been seeing a lot in my immediate circle, like folks who are getting married and having kids in their mid 30s, and they're starting to deal with, you know, their like, you know, help manage their parents aging in their 40s while having kids in elementary school. So they're just, you know, they're just having an existential crisis, you know, and I feel like I wanted to tell the story for all those folks, you know, to see this particular set of, you know, this particular family's experience, and hopefully have it be resonant and have it be meaningful to the folks, both I know and then folks who I know are out there who can relate.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely something that can be said about the universality of wanting to both make your parents proud and also work with them, especially if you work in a similar kind of medium, but then also I would say the denial of health issues is like a big thing too. So and then we have this question too. So it says, I loved how it was reframed to be able to see the joy in the father's response every time he was reintroduced to the baby, versus the kind of also the pain and annoyance of not being able to remember. But I don't know if you've been in contact with either the family themselves, or if you've been in contact with Young and he's been in contact with them, but how they doing?
I just talked to Marielle not too long ago. We're in pretty regular touch. He just had a big show in China. Like I think it's big one man show. So he's doing well work wise. Baby Dun Dun, the little girl, is now 4. My God, she's like a full on toddler. You know, speaking, running, jumping around. Mom and dad are okay. Dad's, you know, continued to deteriorate. Dad doesn't remember Mariang anymore, or he doesn't remember his name. You know, but they're still living in the facility, in the senior care facility, and you know, seemingly doing quite well. You know, with friends around, and mom is doing well health wise. So yeah, I mean, it's actually they're doing, I would say in general, pretty well a couple years out. And Tianyi Mariang's wife is now translating children's book, basically, you know, famous international children's book into Chinese. So she's continuing to work with kids that way. You know, I'm not sure if that was necessarily her goal, but you know, it's, for me, it seems like a nice continuation, you know, of the work that she's doing. So yeah, they're lovely folks, and you know, we do keep in touch with them quite often, and they're also very happy to see, you know, how the film has been received. We actually still waiting for our Chinese theatrical release. The film was supposed to get a release right in the dead of the beginning of the pandemic, so things got totally thrown out of whack. So now we're trying to figure out how to, you know, make that happen, and hopefully they'll be able to participate in that as well sometime soon.
Did you do festivals at all in China, and you're just waiting on theatrical release, or?
Yeah, we did a bunch of festivals in China, and we actually have deals with you know, Youku, which is basically YouTube of China, so an online platform as well. But everything is sort of kind of getting held back a little bit because that initial theatrical release needs to go out. So so we'll just keep on trying to figure out what the best way is moving forward. Yeah, I think right now just any theatrical release is just very tricky. You know, I think that if you pay attention to the theater situation in the US, you could see that a lot of really great films are not necessarily doing very well. People are just really uncomfortable going to theaters for obvious reasons, you know. So you know, I'm hoping that things will turn around soon, and you know, it's one of my favorite things to do, go to a movie and go to the theater and watch a movie with a big crowd of people.
Yeah, I mean, I heard, what was it? Is it Sundance? There's been even festivals are going totally digital for
Yeah, it's
2020.
happening right now. Actually,
Yeah.
today is actually tomorrow is the opening night of Sundance, and they had planned a hybrid festival, but now they moved everything online, which is a shame. You know, it's such a great festival, and I hope that they can, you know, keep moving, and next year it'll be a great in-person celebration.
Yeah. So here's another, oh wait, there was also a comment that I had seen that John had made where it was like, sometimes the process is the art, and that was all about the puppets. And I just wanted to note that I saw that. And yes, I think that that is pertinent, especially in the context of this.
You know, the funny thing, I want to say something about that. So you know, I was trained. I was, as an undergrad, I was an electrical engineer. I was a trained scientist. So for me, it was all about the results, right? Like it's the process of the art is something that I am still working on. You know, I feel like if I can crack that, and I think it's also one of those things that there's not like a switch you turn on that you understand that the process of the art, that it's something that you just continue to work on. And I feel like I will be a better filmmaker if I embrace that idea more, and not be so result oriented, and not be so afraid of making mistakes, and really be open to trying different things. You know, I think I'll probably make more interesting things that way.
Get in the thick of it, you got in the weeds. Forget about what is final products and all those things. I understand entirely. I'm an chronic overthinker, so
Well, there you go.
and then what kind of like dream products or projects do you have that you would love to make, like whether practically or if you could do anything?
Oh gosh.
The end was me editorializing, so I was like,
Yeah, no, that's actually a really difficult question. You know, I'm not very good at lining up my projects ahead of time. Like I tend to have ideas and then I'm really critical of it, you know, so I struggle with that part of it. Right now I'm actually, you know, in the process of developing a personal film about my family and my own immigration experience from Taiwan to the US, but it's really about the relationship between Taiwan and the US. I mean, I feel like over the last year, people know about Taiwan much more than a couple of years ago. You know, people are kind of learning that Taiwan is being sort of this place that's sandwiched and stuck between US and China, right? So that's, you know, for me, like it's time for me to really make a substantial project about Taiwan for the international audience, and that it frightens me that I'm choosing to tell it from a personal perspective, but I also think that that's probably the most you know, I mean, it's why it will be the best way to tell the story. At least I will probably be most satisfied, you know, of potentially having it be that way. So yeah, that's something that I'm struggling with. I don't know, like what other projects. And for a while, I was obsessed about like wanted to make a film about the director Ang Lee, the fiction director Ang Lee, who's Taiwanese American. You know, I just really love his work. Some of his work is has had profound impact in my life. Yeah, I don't have a lot to say on that front. So, and I also have these wacky ideas. You know, oftentimes you have these seedlings of ideas, and for me, I'm a little embarrassed to talk about it because in order to be able to talk about it in really concisely, a lot of development work needs to go into it, you know? So when it's kind of rough and you're not sure what it is, like you know, when I talk about it, it sounds like, oh, that's sort of like a weird little thing, you know, why you're interested in it. So maybe it's better that I don't talk about it so much.
Maybe it would help formulate you know, help stretch it out and get it ready for a full idea. I don't know. I like weird stuff, so maybe that's just my own bias, like coming up to. Also, a documentary on Only would be superb, but I feel like that would probably be a big undertaking.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, he'll have to be okay with it first. So
Right. Obvious. Yeah, that makes sense.
yeah.
Is it like, how would you even go about jumping into like something so personal in relation to telling a story about Taiwan? That sounds scary, and like you were mentioning, kind of feeling weird about that. Like, how? I mean, you probably haven't thought about it too much, anyways.
No, you know, the funny thing is I've actually
start?
thought about it a lot because it's a project that I, you know, I tend to be somebody who just do things when I come up with idea. Like I'm an executor. Like I get things done. But this is a project that I've literally been thinking about it for 10 years, you know, and it's just like I just can't wrap my head around it. I can't get myself to do it. But now I feel like I want to. I mean, I think what I can do is just start by, you know, having long conversations on camera with my family members. I think that that's an easy place to start. And I think that's probably what I will do. So, you know, I'm here, luckily, sort of being here mostly because of the pandemic but being here for the last couple of years has really, you know, given me like a new connection to my homeland, and I've been able to spend a lot of time with my parents that I otherwise would not have been able to. I mean, for 15, 20 years, we've seen each other once or twice a year, and now I see them at least once a month, you know. So I know I wonder if people hear that, they're like, oh my God, that's a big nightmare. I want to see my parents every month. So for me, but for me, it's been sort of a silver lining, and maybe that's, you know, like this is all feeling like fate that I'm supposed to be here and supposed to start the story. So.
And think you're gonna stick? Well, I mean, with the PBS stuff, that was TV. Thinking you're gonna stick with film over TV stuff for now, or?
No, I mean, I'm really proud of the PBS work, and that series, Asian Americans, was I fought to be on that project because I felt like it was sort of a landmark project that I wanted very much to be a part of it. A lot of my film ends up actually on PBS. They have two documentary strands that program a lot of films. One's called Independent Lens, one's called POV. I encourage you guys to check it out. It's great, really great films that ends up in those two series. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty open. You know, I'm also producing more for other folks. You know, it's a great way to get involved in projects that I wouldn't have access to, or we wouldn't know how to make it, you know. So right now I'm producing a project for a filmmaker friend, a dear friend of mine in San Francisco, whose sister-in-law happens to be the prime minister of Iceland. So she's probably one of the very few you know, women world leaders. She's in their 40s. She's probably the youngest. You know, so we're working on that. I'm working with another Chinese filmmaker in China, not in Taiwan, that you know, who's in the midst of finishing up a project about Wuhan. You know, the most sort of infamous city, I guess, in the world now. So you know, I'm continue to do that kind of work, and then I'm working on my own project. So yeah, it's all good. You know, keeping myself fairly busy.
Extra important nowadays, it feels. Gotta something always just to what else is going on in news? Although I guess you're probably in a much different kind of experience in Taiwan than we are here, so makes it a little different. But that is It is past 8 now, so I don't know if anyone had any final questions or anything. I hadn't seen anything else pop up. So otherwise, don't feel like we are keeping you hostage. You can drop off as you need to. And Leo, did you have any final kind of comments or words or turns of phrase for our audience? It's okay.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Maybe this sounds silly or cheesy, but like I feel like every time I talk about the film, I just I mean I always remind myself and everybody that really sort of treasure the moments and love the ones who love you and find beauty in messiness and in uncertainty, right? Which is probably even more resonant right now. So it's something that I'm trying to do myself.
Well, thank you so much for being here this evening, virtually joining us from around the world. So that is the one good thing about lots of Zoom programming now, is that it makes it really easy to be able to connect, which is nice. So cool. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop our recording now. And